Well, we'll start the presentation about a minute or so, give everyone one last minute. But just wanted to say welcome and good morning to everybody. My name is Courtney Rainey. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of Government Affairs here at DEP. Our colleagues at EPA and the Clean Water Trust are looking forward to providing info today and answering any of your questions about the SRF and any of the recent added supplemental funding through the ARPA bill and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Quickly, also want to give a thank you to all of our legislative partners on the federal, state, and local levels. We know a number of you are here today from their offices and some of our state reps and senators as well. So thank you for being great partners, for securing funding, making sure we can get it out to our cities and towns as quickly as possible. It's always good to have good partners with us on our side. First, we will start with a presentation from Mark Spinelli at the EPA, and then my colleague Maria Pinot at DEP, and Nate Keenan at the Clean Water Trust to go over, what the SRF is, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, what it means for cities and towns, and information on how to apply for financing. After their three presentations, we'll have time for Q&A, so please hold your questions until that time. We will get to everybody. And after the briefing on the 11th, after our final briefing next week, we will send around a copy of the slides you're going to see today, as well as any other resources that we mentioned or anything else we think you guys might need or anything anyone asks for. We'll get that out next week. And as you saw when you signed in, we are recording the webinar so we can post it on YouTube, on DEP's YouTube channel. We'll share the link to that as well. That way, in case you need to go back to it or share it with any of your colleagues who might be interested, we can go from there. So without taking up too much more of our time, I will introduce Mark Spinelli. He is the Manager of Municipal Assistance at EPA Region 1. If everyone will bear with me for 1 second, I will share my screen. All right, I think everyone should be able to see that. So Mark, whenever you are ready.
Sure, thank you, Courtney. So good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Spinelli again. I'm the manager of the Municipal Assistance Section at EPA Region 1 in Boston. So I'm going to give you an overview of the SRF programs, what they are, how the program works, some of the roles that we all play. And I'm also going to talk about a topic that's been getting a lot of airplay, of course. And that's all the funding that's coming through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, as you'll hear me refer to it as. BIL represents the largest investment in the nation's infrastructure, and it's not just in the water sector. There's funding for roads, bridges, transportation, internet, etc. So, no wonder why there's a lot of interest in the funds, and more importantly, how to get access to it. So in my talk this morning, I'm going to give you an overview of the SRF, as I mentioned, and at the end, I'll focus on the BIL funding coming through the SRF programs. My section is going to be managing those grants, so I'm probably the right one to talk about this. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so, all right, there we go. Nope, one more. There we go. Okay. All right, so what are the SRF programs? So in order to understand how the SRF programs came about, we need to sort of turn back the clock a bit to the 1970s and 1980s. That's when EPA was funding a massive amount of wastewater construction through a program known as the Construction Grants Program. Many of you may be familiar with that program if you were around back then. So the Construction Grants Program provided 90% funding. So it wasn't loans at that point, it was actual grants to municipalities. So these grants were from the federal government to municipalities for the construction of wastewater treatment plants and sewer collection systems. The majority of the treatment plants we have in operation today were probably and very likely funded through the Construction Grants Program. But of course, like everything else, all good things must come to an end. So at, around the mid 80s, when Congress was phasing out the construction grant programs, they actually replaced it with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Loan Program. So the Clean Water SRF program, that was a program that was created to continue the financing of wastewater infrastructure projects. But the main difference is that, unlike the construction grants program, which were grants to municipalities, the CWSRF program is a low interest loan program, a revolving loan program. It's capitalized annually by the federal government, but it's implemented directly by each of the states in terms of funding projects and working with the municipalities to get those projects done. So the Clean Water SRF program began in 1987, and we started rolling with our first CWSRF grants in 1988. And then 10 years later, in 1997, based on the success of the Clean Water SRF program, the Drinking Water SRF program was born. And it was basically providing the same type of low interest financing as the Clean Water SRF program, but of course, now for drinking water projects. So in a nutshell, the SRF programs are low interest financing programs to fund a wide range of wastewater and drinking water infrastructure improvement projects. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so how do these programs work? Well, it all starts with Congress. Congress annually appropriates national allotments in each of the SRF programs. And then through an allotment formula, which is different in each of the programs, EPA does determine each state's respective allocation of the national appropriation. And then we, EPA Region 1, we award those funds to all of our states. States are required to pony up some match money. They're required to provide a 20% match of the capitalization grant that we give them. And then those combined funds, both federal and state, are then used to provide the low interest financing that I talked about for either wastewater or drinking water projects. So, over time and as the programs have matured, repayments on previously funded projects, they come back to the program. The SRF programs earn interest with funds in the fund. And that combined with new capitalization grants that we give to the states each year, plus the state match funds, all of those funds are combined to provide basically a large pool of funding each year to finance new projects. And then in some cases, or in some states like Massachusetts, they leverage their SRF program with the funds that they receive from EPA by going to the bond market. They sell bonds, and they can bring in 2 to 3 times the amount of annual funding that we're providing from the federal government to provide even a larger pool of funding to finance projects. So, states that have high demands for financing are ideal for like a leveraged SRF program. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so then, as the states make loans for infrastructure projects and, and the work begins, states also disperse funds to the recipients as costs are incurred. Once the project is finished, recipients enter into their payback period, and that can be, 20 to 30 years, depending on certain criteria. And then those repayment funds are recycled and returned back to the program, and again, can be loaned out for new projects. So, you can see kind of the revolving nature of the program. It started out kind of like as a small snowball at the beginning of the program, has increased and been transformed with, repayments, interest earnings, new capitalization grants. So, there's a large amount of funding that can now be, put back out into the economy to fund these infrastructure projects. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and this is just, kind of pictorially what I sort of described. On the left, you got the annual capitalization grants that the states are getting. They pony up their state contributions to the program. And then in the center, you see that, the circular arrows, that's the revolving SRF fund, and that has funds going in and out of it. On the top, again, for states that leverage, you have net bond proceeds coming back into the program and funds going back out of the program to pay the bondholders. And then on the right, you have the flow of the disbursements going out to contractors to fund projects as costs are incurred. And you have repayments coming back into the program from completed projects. And again, those funds then end up getting loaned back out again for new projects. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk about the players here in implementing these programs. So as I mentioned before, the primary player is Congress because they're the ones holding the purse strings. They're the ones that annually appropriate the SRF funding. So without an appropriation, states will not receive a capitalization grant. So it really all starts with Congress finalizing an appropriations bill, which includes SRF appropriations, and then that budget is eventually signed by the president. So once that occurs, EPA, my staff, we award capitalization grants to each of the states. And then we also provide the states with additional guidance and program support through our annual SRF reviews. I'd say states play an absolute critical role because they're the ones really on the front lines directly implementing these programs to recipients. They're the ones that, on one side, they're applying for the funds from EPA for their annual funding. And then, on the other side, they're soliciting projects, they're making loans, they're overseeing construction projects. So, in my view, clearly the states are where the rubber meets the road in these programs. They're the ones that are interfacing with EPA to receive the funds as well as the recipients to carry out the projects. So, I would say, again, I can't emphasize the state's role. Without their active engagement, this program basically wouldn't happen. So a lot of kudos to them. But yes, you all have a role in this as well. So I'd say the biggest message that I can deliver you today is to really get involved, understand the funding cycle process in Massachusetts, be aware of and be on the lookout for the annual call for projects that states go out with each year. I would say if there was ever a time to consider getting your infrastructure project off the ground, it's really now. The amount of money that's being made available, through the normal SRF program, but certainly through BIL, that should, in my view, convince you to consider using the SRF as your funding source. Subsidy in the form of grants or principal forgiveness is also potentially available depending on the state's criteria. And not only that, but they have certainly favorable interest rates and loan terms that are available through the SRF. So, and I know that Massachusetts later on, they're going to be going over their specific requirements as far as, eligibility, how to obtain the funds, et cetera. But suffice to say, I'd say if you're interested in any type of wastewater or drinking water infrastructure improvement project, really now is the time to consider it. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Okay, so are you eligible to receive SRF funding? So I would venture to say that you very likely are. This is just a broad, list of eligible entities that can receive drinking water and clean water SRF funding. It includes private systems, watershed groups, homeowners associations. I do want to point out, though, that the eligible entities are dependent on the type of project being funded. So for example, on the clean water SRF side, if the project's involving the construction of, publicly owned treatment works, or what we refer to as traditional Section 212 projects, only municipalities, intermunicipal, interstate, or state agencies are eligible to receive funding for those type of projects. But in contrast, projects that implement the state's, say, non-point source management plan, there's no restrictions on the eligible entities from a federal perspective. So I just wanted to, really this slide is intended to just give you an idea of the scope of the eligible entities, but it is dependent on the type of project being funded. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so in terms of the projects that can be funded by the Clean Water SRF, the door is pretty much wide open to a wide range of projects. You can go traditional with publicly owned treatment works to non-traditional, such as non-point source projects, stormwater projects, water efficiency projects, etc. The eligibilities in the Clean Water SRF program have been expanded over time through changes in the Clean Water Act. So, probably at this point, it's easier to come up with a list of what's not eligible than really what is. So, as I said, there's just a wide range of projects that can be funded on the clean water side. And then on the next slide. Okay, and I just want to point out that there's similar flexibility and eligibilities regarding, drinking water projects, from treatment to transmission and distribution, planning and design, even costs for consolidating systems, where it makes sense. EPA actually has eligibility compendiums for both the clean water and drinking water SRF programs. which is a comprehensive listing of eligible type projects in different scenarios. So, if we or the state are in doubt in terms of the eligibility of a particular project, we basically refer to those documents. But I would say overall that if the project's intended to address like a public health or water quality concern or issue, it's very likely eligible. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I put this slide and the next slide up just to give you an idea of where Massachusetts is with their SRF programs in terms of just some stats. I'm not going to read every bullet here, but I think it's worth noting that thus far in the Clean Water SRF program, Massachusetts has funded close to $7 billion with a B, $7 billion worth of projects, and they've made about $6.3 billion in project disbursements over the life of the program thus far. And then on the next slide, and likewise in the drinking water SRF program, granted the numbers are a bit less with it being about 10 years younger, but the dollar amount that funded and the amount dispersed, although it's a bit less, I still think that the numbers are pretty impressive. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, in terms of minimum or maximum amounts of funding that can be provided through the SRF, there is no minimum or maximum loan requirement in either program. One thing I will say with regard to the dollar amount of a project is that, if a project's or a group of projects are in roughly the $20 million or more range, and the state SRF program does not have the ability to fund that large of a project, EPA does have a separate program. It's called WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovative Act. And that program is designed to fund larger capital improvement projects. That project, it's not run out of the regions, it's actually run out of headquarters. So if there's a larger project essentially around that ballpark or more that the state cannot fund through their own SRF program, a lot of entities have applied for WIFIA funding. But in Massachusetts, though, I'd say, and how they leverage their program and the cash flow modeling that they do, they are very well equipped to fund large scale projects, and they've done so many times. So even though some Massachusetts entities have looked at the WIFIA program as far as a potential funding source, they've always, to my knowledge, they've always come back to the Massachusetts SRF program. So, okay, next slide, please. All right, so why do you even want to use the SRF funding in the first place? I've already mentioned some of the benefits earlier, but some of the other benefits of using the SRF include getting below market interest rates on your infrastructure project, rather than bonding it yourself or going to the bank. There's also the ability to have extended term financing where the payback can be over a number of years, and that can only help ease the cash flow for the municipality. Another benefit is that some entities may actually be eligible for additional subsidization of their project. And what that means is that it's essentially principal forgiveness of a portion of their loan. Some of the other benefits here is that the project can be funded at a wide range of dollar values. I mean, I told you there's no minimum or maximum. And oftentimes SRF projects are co-funded with other funding sources such as WIFIA, which I just mentioned, but also rural development and FEMA. So there's a lot of co-funding that goes on in the SRF program. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and this is probably what everyone wants to hear about. All the funding that's coming down through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and really how those funds are allocated and can be used. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a quick recap of bill. It was signed last November by President Biden, and it includes $50 billion over 5 years for water-related investments. And of that amount, $43 billion, or about 86% of that, is being funneled directly through the existing SRF programs, which is what I'm going over today. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here are the centerpiece priorities of the infrastructure law as they relate to the funding coming through the SRF programs. First and foremost, there's a very large emphasis on ensuring that disadvantaged communities receive their fair share of this funding, in terms of addressing water quality and public health protection needs. This is an administration priority, and the language in this law does support that priority. Additionally, some of the bill funds have specific targeted eligible uses, such as addressing PFAS and PFOA and emerging contaminants, as well as replacing lead service lines, as well as in the drinking water program. Some requirements that are associated with these funds include adhering to prevailing wage laws under the Department of Labor, such as Davis-Bacon, as well as prioritizing the domestic sourcing of materials used in projects funded with BIL, which is going to be known as the Build America, Buy America Act. So I'm going to refer to that as BABA. That's what we're all calling that. So the BABA provision has been in the SRF programs in one way, shape, or form since 2009, where it was then known as the Buy American provision. That over time morphed into the American Iron and Steel requirements, and now through the implementation of BIL, the programs are going to be required to meet the requirements of BABA. And basically, it means that the projects funded through the SRF programs and BIL must use components manufactured in the United States. It's not just limited to to iron and steel. So let me just say a few words about BABA because we did receive some initial questions on it. So yes, the AIS requirement, the American Iron and Steel requirement, that is being expanded through Build America, Buy America. And it requires that all iron and steel manufactured products and construction materials in BIL-funded projects are produced in the United States. BABA is actually being run out of the Made in America office in the Office of Management and Budget, and they just released their final guidance 2 weeks ago on April 18th. And I just want to point out that this is the overarching guidance for all federal agencies. So each federal agency is going to take that guidance, and we're currently reviewing it for application to our specific federal funding program, such as the SRF. So, and that's happening as we speak. There's been a number of sessions that EPA has been having as far as listening sessions and how they're going to shape the EPA specific guidance in implementing BABA. What I can tell you about the OMB guidance is that it starts on May 14th, 2022, where all projects must meet the requirement that all iron and steel manufactured products and construction materials used in a project is produced in the United States. So there is a lot to unpack there. And the agencies are just currently developing trainings and webinars on how that's going to roll out. Once the EPA guidance on BABA comes out, our contacts at headquarters indicated that they will have follow-up training webinars for the public and private sectors. Really, that's a webinar unto itself. So all I would say is that if you are interested in hearing more about BABA and the requirements, please share your email to Courtney, because I'm collecting emails that we will share with our headquarters counterparts to get you on a distribution list for any future webinars on that topic. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. And then just a quick word about the additional subsidization provisions in each of the BIL, and I call them silos because each part of BIL funding coming through the SRF, some of them have their own specific unique uses. So the BIL statute sets forth certain requirements as to where the additional subsidization needs to go for each of the BIL funding areas. So in the BIL funds related to the drinking water SRF program, 49% of a state's capitalization grant for their general supplemental and lead service line replacement grants, that must be targeted to disadvantaged communities as the state defines disadvantaged communities. And then for the drinking water emerging contaminant BIL funds, 25% of the state's capitalization grant needs to be targeted to disadvantaged communities or public water systems serving fewer than 25,000 persons. So then on the flip side, on the clean water SRF side, the statute language requires that 49% of its general supplemental capitalization grant must go to communities meeting the state's defined affordability criteria. So the language is a little different in each of the statutes, disadvantaged communities for the drinking water SRF program, affordability criteria in the clean water SRF program. But that is the language that's historically been used in each of the programs, and each state will define its own criteria in each of those programs to target those additional subsidy requirements. And then, so these specific percentages and the requirement to target those subsidies to either disadvantaged communities or affordability communities, that's included in the statute, and that's basically what the states need to follow. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here's the 5-year appropriation levels in each of the 5 bill silos, again, as I call them. There's 2 clean water SRF related bill pots, those being the general supplemental funding and the funds targeting, specifically targeted to address PFAS and emerging contaminants. And then there's also 3 DW SRF bill pots, general supplemental, like the clean water SRF, but also the lead service line replacement funding. Yeah, there's the 3, general supplemental, emerging contaminants, and also the lead service line funding. And I just want to say, you can think of these, the general supplemental bill funds as basically an additional SRF capitalization grant in terms of project eligibilities. But the emerging contaminant funds can only be used for projects that address emerging contaminants such as PFAS and PFOA. And then the lead service line replacement bill funds can only be used for, kind of like the name implies, lead service line replacement or other such projects related to lead inventories and lead line removal. So the numbers in these charts is the 5-year nationally appropriated amounts from which each state is going to receive their respective allocation according to that allocation formula I talked about at the beginning. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is the 5-year amount that's being made available through the Clean Water SRF in terms, this is just bill funding. And I want to point out that this is in addition to the base Clean Water SRF funding that is appropriated annually by Congress. So, a portion of these funds may be used for any Clean Water SRF eligible project, while some of these funds are specifically targeted to address emerging contaminants. And as I mentioned earlier, states have the ability to provide some of these funds as principal forgiveness in funding agreements to recipients. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and likewise for the Drinking Water SRF program, this is the funding being made available over 5 years, again, in addition to the base SRF programs. It's the same thing here in that a portion of these funds may be used for any DW SRF eligible project, but some of these funds are specifically targeted to address emerging contaminants, and for the Drinking Water SRF program, lead service line replacement projects. And same thing like the clean water, the states have the flexibility and ability to provide some of these funds as principal forgiveness in their funding agreements to recipients. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and so this is the snapshot of Massachusetts for FY22. So Massachusetts is going to be receiving these funds in each of the bill funding areas for a total of over $188 billion. That's just this fiscal year alone. And as I keep saying, keep in mind that these funds are in addition to the state's normal SRF appropriated amounts, which I refer to as the base SRF programs. So, there's a significant amount of money that's coming down into the state of Massachusetts just this fiscal year alone. And I will just point out that the bill funding levels in this slide will be slightly higher in future years because some of the appropriated amounts increased each year over this 5-year period. So this is the minimum that Massachusetts will be receiving, and some of the future years it'll even be more than this. Okay, next slide. Thanks. Okay, so where do you fit in all this, and what can you do? So as I stated earlier, I think the best things communities can do is just figure out what projects are needed and develop, capital improvement plans to address these infrastructure needs. I'd say if you've done that, you're already ahead of the curve. The next thing to do is get engaged with your SRF program, learn their process and decide whether to move forward or not. The state is really the best source of information since they're the ones that will be able to walk you through the process and give you pointers and tips on how to access that funding. I'd say that this is such an unprecedented time where much of this funding is being made available, particularly particularly through this infrastructure law funding. And it's not just this year, it's for the next 4 years as well. You know that old adage, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a lottery ticket. Well, I'm going to tell you the same kind of goes here. You can't receive any of the bill funds unless you apply and are included on the state's project priority list. I'd say that that's the biggest key to obtaining funding. Every state has a public participation process, so I would encourage you all to be part of it and be aware of that and just understand how the funding process works. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just last word here, I'd say establish a relationship with the state's SRF programs. Many communities have earned sort of like frequent flyer miles for the times that they've accessed SRF funding through the state. So, if you're starting out or if you're just starting out and haven't used the SRF before, definitely reach out to the state so that they can explain the programs that they can offer and walk you through the entire process. So really, that's the only way that the bill funding is going to be accessible to you all, is really by talking to the state. And I think that wraps me up. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. Up next is Maria Pinot. She is the Director of the Division of Municipal Services here at DEP. So Maria, I'll move to the next slide, and whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thank you, Courtney. Good morning. I'm Maria Pinot, the Director of the Division of Municipal Services at MassDEP. My division is responsible for oversight of the SRF projects. In Massachusetts, the SRF program is jointly administered by MassDEP and the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust. MassDEP has oversight over the projects, and the trust manages the program funds and the SRF loans. Today, I will be providing a brief overview of the SRF application process, which is key for accessing the infrastructure funding, as Mark indicated. Next, oh, great, I have it. MassDEP's role. SRF finance projects are owned and managed locally, but MassDEP, through the Division of Municipal Services, has oversight of the projects. MassDEP's oversight includes making sure that the projects that we select for financing are eligible according to SRF program requirements, and also that once they receive a loan, they are implemented in accordance to those requirements. This entails originating the proposal development of water infrastructure from local governments and other eligible entities to apply for SRF loans. Each July, MassDEP launches a solicitation to accept proposals for the next calendar year. The applications that are known as a project evaluation form, or PEF for short, along with the supporting documentations, are due by the August deadline that is noted in the solicitation. The information that is provided in the PEF allows MassDEP to evaluate and rank projects based upon the severity of the problem being addressed and also the effectiveness of the solution in solving that problem. MassDEP has developed a project selection criteria for each of the SRF's clean water and drinking water to ensure that the most important projects in terms of public health and environmental protection receive priority for financing. After MassDEP evaluates and ranks the proposals, a list of priority projects that is known as the intended use plan, or IUP for short, is developed. Projects appearing on the IUP are offered financing. And this is a requirement from Congress. Once projects receive financing and begin implementation, MassDEP monitors the progress of the projects and ensures that they are completed in compliance with requirements. MassDEP, and this is a very key role, also provides compliance assistance to SRF borrowers and helps those who are new to the program navigating the nuances of the program from the start of the project to throughout its completion. Next slide, please. So project selection criteria is the definition of the project is paramount in identifying the public health and environmental impacts of the problem. MassDEP and the trust are committed to financing all planning projects to define the problem and identify sound and effective solutions. And because demand for construction projects is greater than the program capacity, MassDEP needs to know how serious or prevalent the problem is and how the problem can effectively be addressed in order to rank proposals and identify project priorities. Some of the priorities that MassDEP currently has identified are a lead service line replacement, a PFAS remediation, and a combined sewer overflow control. Next slide, please. Project selection criteria. MassDEP has established criteria that include, among other factors, the nature of the problem, the populations affected, the sensitive environmental receptacles being impacted, and how effective the project will be in solving those problems in a cost-effective manner. Whether the project is needed to achieve compliance with standards or permit limits is a very important consideration. Other considerations include intermunicipal agreements to resolve a regional water quality problem, the use of innovative approaches, and also we encourage proposals that add components that result in reduction of energy or water consumption, or that include renewable energy components. The trust offers added subsidies in the form of loan forgiveness to projects that construct a renewable energy component, and also to those projects that fall within an affordability tier community. And my colleague Nate Keenan will address this in more detail in his presentation. Next slide, please. So how do we go about applying for an SRF loan? The SRF deadlines are established according to EPA grant commitments and are therefore fairly fixed. However, MassDEP and the trust will make every effort to work with borrowers to meet their specific project needs. The application process begins with the project solicitation. The proposals recommended to receive SRF financing are published on the draft IUP, and these IUPs list the projects by priority ranking, the estimated cost of the project, and all the sources of available funding. Following a 30-day comment period that includes a public hearing, the IUP is finalized, and typically some additional projects are added to the final IUP based on the facts presented through testimony. Only the projects that appear on the IUP then are offered financing. The final IUP is published at the beginning of the IUP year. And once a project appears on an IUP, and borrowers may proceed to apply for a loan. A key deadline in the application process is the June 30th deadline for local appropriation of the project at town meeting. And once loan agreements are executed and then construction may begin. MassDEP reviews bid documents before they are published to ensure that they conform to SRF requirements. The application process takes approximately 18 months to 2 years from project proposal to having a loan in place and to start construction. Next slide, please. Project oversight. MassDEP's Division of Municipal Services oversees a project implementation to monitor progress of the project, processing invoices, and ensures that all projects comply with federal cross-cutting requirements and public bidding laws. MassDEP reviews the local borrowing authorization, the project plans and specifications, and ensures that all required permits are in place. MassDEP works closely with borrowers and their consultants until the project is completed. A MassDEP project engineer is assigned to each project to provide compliance assistance from the start of the project through its completion. And next slide, please. Project oversight of construction projects includes MassDEP visiting the construction sites to monitor progress, address any change orders, and ensure that the projects are compliant with requirements and including the prevailing wages. MassDEP is committed to processing payment requisitions, typically within a week of receipt of a complete payment requisition package that contains the backup documentation for the work completed. The trust typically wires the funds the next day, so we ensure that the funds are available as the projects move forward. When the project is about 90% complete, MassDEP initiates the project closeout procedure and ensures that the last payment is authorized for payment. Next slide, please. So readiness to proceed is a central theme for SRF financing. For your reference, this slide provides a pictorial depiction of the SRF application process that I had described earlier, and includes the deadline, the timeline for the calendar year 2023 financing cycle. Once a project is approved by MassDEP and the trust executes the loan documents, the borrower has 6 months to initiate the bidding and start construction. Projects that do not meet these deadlines risk being removed from the intended use plan and are replaced by a lower ranked project that is ready to proceed. That way, we ensure that SRF funds continue to be used during the financing cycle. Next slide, please. So accessing supplemental funds, as Mark indicated, the supplemental fund infrastructure funds will be available over a period of 5 years, starting with this year. MassDEP and the trust are expeditiously putting these funds to work, starting with the 2022 IUP. This IUP is for the projects that applied last July. It is imperative that the communities start planning now to ensure that they have an opportunity to access these funds in future IUPs. For planning purpose, this slide depicts a suggested timeframe of when project needs to be submitted for the proposal or PEF, so that the funds can be available to start construction. MassDEP is ready to assist you in any way we can. So please reach out to me with any questions. You will be getting my contact information after this presentation. That concludes my presentation. And next, my colleague Nate Keenan, the Deputy Director of the Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, will be presenting next. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So my goal today is to walk through why you would go through the trust for your water infrastructure financing. You've just heard how the process works and what's going on and the updates of the bill funding. So I'm going to walk through why you'd use us. And I know that most cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth are very professional and can go on their own to issue debt. So we are a different process, but we do offer additional benefits as well. So there is some real cost savings in using the trust. All right, next slide, please. All right, so at our most basic, our program is a subsidized loan program. So we offer a 20-year loan with a 2% interest rate. And so what that provides communities is stable planning for the future. That 2% rate will not change even as market rates fluctuate. So what you're seeing right now is market rates going up quickly. And so there'll be some uncertainty when you finally finish your project and go to long-term financing. Going through the trust, it will be fixed at 2%. Loans over 20 years have an interest rate above 2%. Recently, we've been about 2.2% for that, but we have been at about 2.4 before. And then certain projects, and I will get into this later on, qualify for a reduced interest rate or 0% interest. We also offer interim financing or construction loans for projects. So we really want to be your one-stop shopping for all your financing needs for your project. And so with the interim financing, it comes with no fees and no interest. So it's as cheap as possible. And you can be on interim financing for a number of years. And so that just adds additional savings instead of you having to ban for the project yourself and the fees and interest associated with that, especially short-term interest right now. Those rates have really gone up. So this is a real cost savings for communities. Additionally, we do have flexible repayment terms. We can go out 30 years. We can also work with you to structure your debt service schedules with level debt service or level principal. We can work on that as you get closer to the loan being permanently financed as we work through the process. And then this is where the real cost savings come in. You've heard today Mark talk about the disadvantaged communities and Maria talk about the disadvantaged communities. A lot of the bill funding is being targeted towards these. It's being mandated that it goes to disadvantaged communities, or sorry, the additional subsidy from the bill funding go towards disadvantaged communities. So we have an annual calculation that we do. We've been doing this for a number of years now, and we use the same process for both clean water and drinking water because most communities that borrow through the trust have both projects. So we want to keep it as simple as possible so you can understand where you stand with us. So the annual calculation is based on a per capita income number that we get from MassDEP. And then we lay out here, we put it into a tiered system. So 80 to 100% is tier 1, 60 to 80 is tier 2, then less than 60 of the state's average is tier 3. And then you see the numbers that we have here. These are our annual loan forgiveness numbers that we commit to funding each year. So this is just our base program of what we offer, and it shows our tiered system. And then, so if you're a tier 3 community, those are some real cost savings, and in addition to the interest rate savings you'll receive going through the trust. Okay, next slide, please. And so this here is a map of our disadvantaged community program. It shows where the communities are located throughout the state. So as you'll see, this isn't targeted towards small communities, large communities, east or west, anything like that. This is really just based on the numbers that we're getting and where they fall. So there's a lot of communities out west, a lot of communities in central Mass, southeast, in the north as well. So this is really for the entire state can benefit from our disadvantaged communities program. So take a look at this. This is also on our website as well. And our website lays out the entire calculation, where the tiers are and how you can see where you fall. So all that information is available on our website, and our website is in the back of this presentation as well. All right, next slide, please. So in addition to our standard 2% rates, our disadvantaged communities program, we also offer these other programs as well. So the asset management planning grants, we've been offering these for a number of years now. It's a 60% grant to assist communities with completing or updating asset management plans. The idea here is really ensure the operational integrity of the water utility, and also to create a pipeline of projects coming through the trust. So you'll do your asset management plan from us, develop a list of projects that you'll look to finance in the future, and then hopefully come through us for that as you get ready to do those projects. Also, I know I'm talking to Central Mass and Western Mass, but we do also manage the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection, or we hold the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Trust Fund, just for anyone from the Southeast who's on this call today. So this is a short-term rental tax that is charged to hotels, motels, and Airbnbs. And so a portion of this goes into the fund that sits with us, and any projects coming through us that qualify through the Cape or on the Cape are currently receiving 25% loan forgiveness. So this was a really interesting idea that the Cape communities came up with to solve their water quality issues. They relied on a local resource and are leveraging that resource to reduce the costs they're paying to do these projects. So I would just put it out there for regions to think about what they could do to do something similar and come up with a unique solution to lower the cost for these projects. Additionally, we offer the Housing Choice Loan Program. So communities that have achieved the Housing Choice designation through the administration, it's an initiative to try to incentivize communities to adapt the housing choice goals. You're eligible for an interest rate reduction of 50 basis points below the Syrian market rate of 2%. You can't go below 0, but you can go below 2 through this program. Right, and we also offer 0% nutrient enrichment reduction loans. So to remediate or prevent nutrient enrichment of surface waters, water bodies, or water supplies. So these are throughout the state. We've done a number of these loans, and they're traditionally rather expensive projects. So there's some real cost savings if you're doing a $25 million project or more to getting a 0% interest rate on these. And this is also on our website as well. It has the details of the criteria you have to meet to receive the 0% interest. And then finally, the most timely right now are the PFAS mitigation loans. We're seeing that PFAS is popping up throughout the state. And so we're stepping up to commit to doing 0% loans for these projects, to get these projects moving forward, to get over the hurdle, because they do pose a serious health risk, and getting ahead of these is crucial. Okay. Next slide, please. Then also, I just want to touch on this. This is a little bit of a different program that we're running, but whenever I'm in front of a group, I just like to bring this up. So we offer through MassDEP lead testing schools for free. It's a grant program we run. The contact information is right here for Michael Salona, who runs that program. And then once you've tested, and if you found you have an issue in your in your schools, then you can come through the best acronym in state government, if you ask me, the SWIG program, the School Water Improvement Grants. So we are currently accepting applications for the SWIG program. If you find an issue, we will provide funding for you to install filtered water bottle filling stations to remediate the lead in that's coming out of the drinking water. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I wanted to cover the ARPA funding that we received through the legislature, and then how we're seeing how the ARPA funding is kind of our roadmap for what we hope to be able to provide through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the BIL funding, which is a great acronym for a bill, right? So, all right, next slide, please. All right, so this gives you an idea of what we were able to do with the 87 million that we received from the legislature. We were given 100, but then some of that went to earmarks. So we ended up with about 87 million. So we were able to, for the 2021 intended use plan, we were able to commit to this level of subsidy for these projects. And so we're looking to do something similar in the future years with the BIL funding. We're working out the details on how this will work specifically, but the ARPA funding is kind of our roadmap. We're trying to develop a program that towns can understand that if they come in through us over the next few years, it will be basically level subsidy. So you're not seeing a spike in one year and a decline in the next year, but we're trying to make it as, for planning purposes, as level as possible for communities. And so this is what we did for ARPA, and we're hoping to do something similar with the BIL funding. Next slide, please. And this just gives you an idea of the projects that we're funding and where they're located. There will be a large, we're hoping the projects will move forward. There's a large increase for the 2022 funding, and we're very excited about that. But this gives you an idea of where the projects are that are currently going to construction right now. All right, next slide. And then Mark touched on this, but I just wanted to bring this up again. So this is our next 5 years of federal funding and our state match as well. So you can see that these numbers are substantial. So as we've touched on, if you've missed the 2022 intended use plan, that's fine. You still have a number of years to get your projects in. And in addition to this, so we've seen the amount that we have to forgive of each grant, 49%, and then 100% of the others. But in addition to that, the funds that we're not giving away will revolve back into the program. So there will be additional funding available in excess of what we've given away over the past number of years. So this is really going to capitalize the program for the future. So it'd be great if you can come in the next few years and access some of this additional subsidy that we have. But if not, over the next coming years, I could really see an increase in our program's capacity to provide more subsidized loans. So this is a really great opportunity to get into the SRF program and to see what we can offer and how we can help you. And I would just recommend, if you have any other questions, other than if you think of anything after today, please reach out to us directly. We'd be more than happy to talk to you and walk you through it and answer any project specific questions that you may have. All right, next slide. All right, so here's our contact information, how you can get in touch with us, our website, even MassDEP's Instagram, which is great. And then the rest of the slides are just contact, or it's just resources you can have for the future. And so that's all I have. And thank you so much for your time.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nate. We are going to move on to question and answer. I know that some folks have been pinging the chat, so I'm going to check that now that my screen isn't shared with everybody. And we got 1 or 2 questions beforehand. And if anyone has questions now, I would ask to help keep us organized if you can use the raise your hand feature. You can find that on the bottom where you have your mute and your stop video. All the way in the right-hand side, there's a smiley face with reactions, and in there is the raise hand feature. So I'll do my best to ping back and forth between the chat. Anyone has their hand up for a question, and I will let Maria, Mark, and Nate answer those as they come in. They are the experts here. But let me open up what I have. I know that one of the questions we got beforehand, in addition to standard water sewer projects, they'd be very interested to hear about how we can utilize EPA, DEP, federal infrastructure, or ARPA funds for stormwater management, which is becoming a larger and larger issue.
So yeah, in terms of stormwater management projects, I don't know if you remember from one of my slides, stormwater projects are definitely eligible under the Clean Water SRF program. And then one thing I will add to that is that there's actually a new grant program called the Overflow Stormwater and Reuse Grant Program that EPA is rolling out to the states this year. Basically, this was a program that had appropriated funding for FY20 and 21. Took EPA a bit to come up with the final implementation guidance memo, which did come out. So states are now preparing grant applications to receive some of those funds. Those funds are specific to CSOs, SSOs, and stormwater projects. So there's another source of financing and funding for any type of stormwater project.
Thank you. Another one, infrastructure expenditures supported by ARPA funds deferred to SRF criteria for applicability, with the rehabilitation of a primary drinking water supply dam to meet the Office of Dam Safety requirements for passing the spillway design flood, be an eligible expenditure of ARPA funds under SRF guidelines.
Yeah, so prior to 2021, dam and reservoir projects were not eligible under the Drinking Water SRF program. That was baked right into our DWSRF federal regulations. The thought being at the time that dam and reservoir projects were primarily for future growth, which is definitely prohibited by the statute to use SRF funds. However, over time, there had been requests to reconsider that. And just last year, July of 2021, EPA issued a class deviation from that prohibition in the federal regulations. So under certain conditions, and in the deviation memo, there's a list of requirements, one of which being is that the dam or reservoir has to be 100% owned by the public water system. And there's a couple of other requirements, but in general, now with that class deviation, dam and reservoir projects are eligible for funding under the DWSRF program.
So some questions in the chat. Are fire and water districts eligible for SRF funding?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, all public water suppliers are.
Okay, so I think a nod to the next question, are water districts eligible that are run by nonprofits and the infrastructure is not owned by a town?
Yes, all public water suppliers are eligible for the drinking water SRF.
Let's see, next question. Since manganese is on UCMR 4, will manganese be viewed as an emerging contaminant by Massachusetts SRF and eligible for the 25% grant for disadvantaged communities and those under 25,000 population?
Yes, it is.
Next question. If a community submits an SRF application this year and finds itself bumped because of more eligible projects due to the amount of applications, does the community need to reapply or will it be left in line for the next appropriation year?
The community needs to reapply because each financing cycle starts from the beginning.
Okay, they all start from scratch. Okay.
Yes.
Great. See the next question. Oops, scroll too far. Are projects on the 2022 Clean Water SRF IUP eligible for bill funding that may come through as loan forgiveness?
Yes, there are. And the draft intended use plan is posted on our website and has that information, same for the drinking water SRF. And we anticipate being able to issue the final IUPs very soon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you.
Could we discuss whether or how the federal procurement requirements will apply to bill grants and loans and ARPA projects?
Can you repeat the question? I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Sure. Could we discuss whether or how the federal procurement requirements will apply to BIL grants and loans and ARPA projects?
Those are the requirements have not changed, so they have to comply with SRF requirements.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, there are procurement requirements, and if I'm not mistaken, I mean, does it fall on the does the state have state procurement requirements as well? So.
Yes, the public. Yes, nothing has changed. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let me read the next one. So to confirm, Tier 3 communities are eligible for 49% loan forgiveness if the approved project will be funded through BIL, provided resources made available through the Clean Water SRF. If the project is not funded through BIL, it would be 9.9%, making this somewhat of a wild card from a planning perspective. Is that correct? Or will all loans to Tier 3 communities be eligible for 49% forgiveness?
So the 49% is what we have to give away of the grant. It's not connected to the loans. So that's where some confusion is coming in here. And I do understand it is confusing. So we have to then spread that forgiveness over all eligible projects. And so 49% will pretty much not, I don't think we could get to that number just because it's such a high number. So that's what we're trying to figure out and come out with a determination for how much we will be giving away for each project. And we hope to have that out in the coming weeks. So I do understand there is a wild card to your point, but we are trying to figure that out. It's just a lot to manage with all the different projects we have, who qualifies, who doesn't, and how we can best distribute that. Then also keep it consistent year over year to hopefully keep for that planning purpose. So we are working through that, and we'll have something out on that shortly. But the 49% is disconnected from the loans. It's what we have to do federally to meet our federal requirements.
That's basically to calculate the dollar amount of that cap grant. Once the state knows what the dollar amount is, then they distribute it, accordingly as they see fit.
Another question. Mark mentions that there is no minimum maximum loan requirements for SRF, but I believe Massachusetts has a max loan of $15 million for individual drinking water projects annually. Is the trust considering raising that max loan amount going forward?
So that max loan amount is just to hold over for 1 year. So for cash flow purposes, we do fund the entire project, and we've always funded the entire project. So it's really just to be sure that we can reach more projects on the intended use plan. And then when the cash cash starts coming out the door, we're funding them the next IUP and the next IUP. So it's really a way for us to manage cash flow out the door, but we do fund the entire project every time.
Okay. I think that is it for questions. I think I've gotten through the chat. As a reminder, we will be sharing these slides and a recording of the briefing once we wrap up the final and third one next week, just in case we need to make any edits to the slides or anything. We'll make sure everyone has the same version at the end of next week. We will get those out. And if you leave here and you think of any questions, please reach out. We're always around, always available. Happy to also, if you have questions about individual projects in your city or town, need a little more one-on-one question time, we're always happy to do that. So please reach out to me. Jacob, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yes, I just had a question about projects using local ARPA funding. So the projects follow eligible projects as stated as in the SRF guidelines. But as far as funding for them, would they still need to meet the same AIS standards? So you have a project, you put out the bid, but you need to put in there that that project must meet the AIS standards for it to be an ARPA eligible project, even if it's local funds and not going through the Clean Water Trust. Thank you.
Yeah, because if it was just strictly, I mean, because the SRF has those requirements, that project would need to follow those requirements.
Thanks, Mark. Jen Peterson, you have your hand up.
Sorry, just a follow up to that. So I guess I had a different interpretation of that. I mean, it had to be an SRF type project, but I wasn't aware that it had to go through the same SRF requirements.
I was understanding his question to mean a co-funded project. Was he not referring to a co-funded?
No, this would be a completely locally funded project through the federal and local ARPA funds.
Oh, all right. Then
I'm sorry about that.
Right, ARPA does not have those requirements. I thought you were talking about a co-funded project. So if you have ARPA funds and SRF funds, ARPA doesn't require those AIS. SRF does. So if it's strictly ARPA funds, no, it's not. But if it's co-funded, then it ties in all the SRF requirements because there's SRF funding in there. So I misunderstood.
Understood that. Thank you. Thanks, Jen, for helping out.
All right.
Well, it looks like that might be all of the questions for today. Thank you very much to our presenters, and thank you all of you for joining us today. Hopefully this was useful, and we'll get this out to you all next week. And again, if you have follow-up questions or if you wanted to be added to Mark's outreach list for BABA requirements, please let me know. Please email me. I think you all have my email, courtney.rainey@mass.gov. And we'll be in touch next week with all of this. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Have a good
much.
day, everybody.
Thank you.